My drunk sister dropped my infant son, and then we discovered she had given him alcohol hours. Later, she showed up at our house demanding to see him. The rule was simple. Megan could never go near Jackson if she had been drinking. I had made that clear before I ever let my sister back into my life, and she had looked me straight in the eye and promised. She understood at the time I wanted to believe her. I had spent years keeping my distance from Megan because alcohol had slowly become the center of everything she did. At first it was occasional drinking, then it became weekends, then several nights a week, until eventually it seemed like she always had a drink in her H. And what scared me most wasn't the drinking itself, it was how little control she seemed to have. Once she started, Megan could be funny, affectionate, and completely normal one minute, then reckless and aggressive the next. She also had a habit of dragging everyone around her into whatever she was doing. I learned that the hard way when we were younger. Once, after she realized I had no interest in alcohol, she tried to pressure me into drinking. Anyway, I refused. Every time she treated that refusal like a personal insult. After enough arguments, I finally told her that if she ever tried to force alcohol on me again, I would cut her out completely. She laughed it off. I didn't for A. While life was easier without her, I met David, fell in love, got married, and eventually had Jackson. Becoming a mother changed the way I looked at everything suddenly. Decisions weren't just about what I could tolerate anymore. They were about what could put my son at risk. Megan wasn't part of my life during most of my pregnancy, but after Jackson was born, she reached out unexpectedly. She apologized for the past and said becoming an aunt had made her realize what she had thrown away. I was skeptical. There were, too, many red flags to ignore, especially because I knew she was still drinking. When we met, she admitted alcohol was still part of her life and said she had no intention of giving it up. That answer bothered me, but she made one promise that mattered. She would never involve me in drinking again, and she would never put my baby in danger. Because of it, I didn't fully trust her, but I agreed to give her another chance. For months, she actually respected my boundaries. She never pressured me to drink, never showed up obviously drunk, and never crossed a line around Jackson. Slowly, I started wondering if maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe she really was changing. Maybe our relationship could exist with enough distance and enough rules. Then Megan came to my house. With 2 bottles of wine, the evening started. Normally, David had a glass. Megan poured herself another, and I stayed completely sober. I was watching Jackson talking with David and trying not to focus on how quickly Megan was going through the bottles. She finished most of them herself by the time she stood up from the couch. Her speech was slightly slurred, and her movements were unsteady. I need the bathroom? She said. The bathroom's upstairs? I told her. She disappeared up the stairs. A few minutes passed. Something about the silence bothered me. I couldn't explain it, but I suddenly had that old sketchy vibe in the pit of my stomach. I walked upstairs and checked the bathroom. Megan wasn't there. I turned toward our bedroom and froze. She was sitting on the edge of our bed. She was holding Jackson. For 1 second, my bra in refused to process what I was seeing. Megan was completely wasted, her hair messy, her eyes unfocused, one arm wrapped around my infant son as though this were some completely normal family moment. What are you doing? Her face changed instantly. She tried to stand. I moved toward her. Give me my baby. Megan stumbled forward. Her balance disappeared beneath her, and she lost her grip. Jackson dropped. He hit the floor. I screamed. Megan grabbed for him, but I shoved past her and scooped Jackson into my arms. He was crying hard, his face red, but he was moving. I checked his head, his arms, his legs, everything I could see. I was shaking so badly that I could barely keep my hands steady. David came running upstairs. What happened? She dropped him. His expression changed. Immediately, he took Jackson from me while I turned toward Megan. What the hell were you thinking? I'm sorry, she kept saying. I didn't mean to. You were drunk. I told you one rule. I know, no, you clearly don't. David was already checking Jackson. While I forced Megan downstairs, she kept apologizing. But there was something hollow about it. She wasn't acting like someone who fully understood what had just happened. She looked frightened because she had been caught. I called her a cab and told her to leave. You're never coming back here, I said. Megan nodded. Crying now, I understood, and I didn't believe her. David and I spent the next several minutes checking Jackson. He was still crying, but he seemed alert. We thought the worst thing that had happened was the fall. Then Jackson started vomiting, not once, again and again. David looked at me. Something's wrong. My stomach dropped. What did she do? I don't know. We rushed upstairs. Jackson was vomiting again, and his tiny body looked completely overwhelmed. David grabbed the phone and called for emergency help. While I held our son against my chest, then I saw the bottle. Megan hadn't simply been drunk around him. She had given him alcohol. The realization hit harder than the fall. She gave him wine, I said. David stared at me. What? I think she gave him the wine. The next few minutes blurred together. I kept thinking about the rule I had made, the one thing I had demanded from Megan, the one boundary she had promised to respect. She hadn't just crossed it. She had walked straight through it. The ambulance arrived, and Jackson was taken to the hospital. David stayed beside him while I followed, barely able to think. The fear was physical now. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My heart hammered against my ribs, and every few seconds I found myself staring at Jackson as if I needed visual proof that he was still there at the hospital. Doctors immediately began running tests. They confirmed that Jackson had alcohol poisoning and needed to be monitored closely. Hearing those words made everything inside me go cold. My baby had alcohol poisoning because of my sister. David and I sat beside each other while the doctors worked. Neither of us knew what to say. We'd spent months trying to protect Jackson from every ordinary danger parents worry about, and somehow, the person we had allowed back into our home had become the most dangerous thing in his life. The hospital also began asking questions. How had Jackson gotten the alcohol? Who had been supervising him? Why had an intoxicated person been holding him? The questions kept coming. We answered everyone. Still, I could see the suspicion in the room. We were his parents. And from the outside, this looked terrible. I wanted to scream that we hadn't done this. We had trusted someone we thought might finally have changed, but none of that mattered in that moment. Only Jackson mattered. After hours of tests and monitoring, the doctors finally told us he was going to be okay. There was no immediate permanent damage, but they warned us that infants could react severely to alcohol and that Jackson would need follow-up care. I nearly collapsed from relief. David pulled me into his arms, and we stood there holding each other while Jackson slept nearby. Then I thought about Megan. She hadn't called. She hadn't asked. If Jackson was alive, she hadn't apologized. She had simply disappeared. That was the moment something inside me hardened. The sister I had spent months trying to understand and was gone from my life for good. The next morning, when we finally brought Jackson home, I blocked Megan's number, then I blocked her social media accounts and emailed. David did the same. We saved every message, every photograph, and every piece of information connected to what had happened. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. That afternoon, Megan started contacting relatives, telling them I was exaggerating what happened. She claimed Jackson had only accidentally gotten a tiny sip of wine and that I was using the incident as an excuse to punish her. It was classic gaslighting. Some relatives believed her. Others told me I should give her another chance because she was clearly sorry. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had gotten drunk in my house, taken my infant son upstairs, dropped him, and given him alcohol. Now she was rewriting the story and making herself the victim. I didn't respond to her. I didn't argue with the relatives defending her. I didn't give Megan another opening. David and I installed a security camera at the front door and started documenting everything. We agreed that if Megan ever showed up at our home again, we would not negotiate, explain, or give her another chance. Jackson's safety came first. That night, I checked the camera before going to bed. Nothing. The house was quiet. Jackson was sleeping peacefully. For the first time since the hospital, I allowed myself to believe that maybe the nightmare was over. Then at 11:30 p.m., my phone vibrated with a security alert. Someone was standing outside our front door. The camera showed Megan stumbling up our walkway with a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a teddy bear tucked under the other arm. She was clearly drunk. She pressed the doorbell 3 times, leaned against the wall, and stared directly into the camera. Then she sat on the porch and stayed there for almost 20 minutes. David and I watched from the living room without turning on a single light. "Don't open the door," I whispered. I wasn't planning to. Eventually, Megan stood, placed the flowers and teddy bear beside the door, and walked away. We waited until her car disappeared before David went outside. He brought everything inside, without touching the flowers more than necessary. There was a handwritten note attached to the bouquet. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Please let me see my nephew. He needs his auntie." I read it twice. There had been no misunderstanding. Jackson had ended up in an emergency room because Megan had been drinking and ignored the one boundary I had given her. Now she was standing outside our house, drunk, asking to see him. David photographed the note before we threw everything away. The next morning, I called Jackson's pediatrician and explained what had happened. I asked them to flag his medical file and make sure nobody could obtain information about him without direct verification from me or David. That precaution paid off faster than I expected. Later that afternoon, the pediatrician's office called. Someone claiming to be your sister requested Jackson's medical records. The receptionist told me. My blood ran cold. What did she say? She said she was helping you arrange a specialist consultation. We asked for authorization. She couldn't provide it and ended the call. I thanked her and immediately added the incident to our documentation. Megan wasn't just trying to get back into our house anymore. She was looking for information about my son. David wanted to involve the police, but when we spoke with an officer, we were told that, while the behavior was concerning, we needed to continue documenting every incident. The more consistent the pattern became, the stronger our case would be if Megan escalated. I hated hearing that it meant we had to wait for someone who had already endangered our baby to do something worse. We started changing the way we lived. We stopped posting anything about Jackson online. We removed old photographs from public accounts and changed Our privacy settings. David installed additional cameras around the house, including the driveway and backyard I kept. A separate folder containing screenshots, call logs, voicemails, photographs, and every message Megan sent through relatives we. Didn't respond to any of it that became our rule. Then came the daycare we hadn't enrolled. Jackson yet, but we had already chosen a place for him, 4 when I returned to work. David and I went there to warn the manager about Megan and show her a photograph the manager's. Face changed, actually. Someone was here yesterday asking about enrollment. I felt my stomach tighten. What did? She looked like the manager described Megan. Then she confirmed it was her. Megan had told the daycare. She was considering registering her nephew and wanted information about their procedures she had never been authorized. To make decisions for Jackson she had no reason to be there, we canceled our plans with. The daycare immediately that evening, a mutual acquaintance contacted me. She said Megan had been asking questions about our routine. What time did Jackson usually sleep? When did we take him outside, did we? Still keep a spare key somewhere. I didn't need to hear anything else. We called a locksmith. Every lock changed, every alarm code changed, every window was checked. David also moved the spare keys and updated our security settings. The house that had once felt completely ordinary now had cameras watching. Every entrance a few days later, I took Jackson to the grocery store it was supposed to be. A normal trip, I needed diapers and a few things for dinner. Jackson was secured in his carrier. And I was halfway through the produce section when I saw someone standing at the end of the aisle. Megan, she wasn't shopping. She was watching me the second our eyes met. She turned toward the oranges and pretended to examine them. I didn't wait to see what she would do next. I abandoned the cart and headed for the exit. I kept Jackson close as I crossed the parking lot, unlocked the car, secured him inside, and drove away. I checked the rearview mirror repeatedly. I never saw Megan's car, but that didn't make the encounter feel accidental. When I got home, I called David. He left work immediately. We contacted the police again and began documenting the grocery store incident. There wasn't enough proof to establish that Megan had deliberately followed me, but now the pattern was impossible to ignore. The next week was worse. Blocked numbers began appearing on my phone, then new. Email addresses, then social media accounts. Every message came from Megan. At first she sounded apologetic. I know. You're protecting Jackson, I understood, and why you're angry. Then came the guilt trips, don't you think? He deserves to know his aunt. You're taking away his family. How can you do this to me? When I didn't answer, the tone changed. You can't keep him from me forever. You're being unreasonable. I have rights as his family. I saved everything and replied to nothing. David, and I also. Hired a nanny to help with Jackson. We told her exactly what was happening and gave her Megan's photograph. 2 weeks later, she called me during a walk with Jackson. There is a car that's passed us 3 times. My heart jumped. Are you sure I can't see who's driving? But it keeps circling the same block. She immediately turned around and brought Jackson home. We reviewed the security footage afterward, but the vehicle was too far away to identify. Still, we added the incident to the file that night. Neither David nor I wanted to sleep around too. In the morning, David woke me. There's a car outside. I went to the window across the street. Sat a familiar hatchback. Megan's hatchback. It had been there for at least an hour. David grabbed his phone. I'm going outside. Don't get too close. He walked toward the car while I watched. From behind the blinds, the headlights suddenly came on. David stopped. The car remained still for several seconds. Then Megan stepped out. Even from the window, I could see her posture. She wasn't stumbling. This time she was completely still, staring at our house. David confronted her from a safe distance. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I saw Megan point toward the house. Then she raised both hands as if she were trying to explain herself. A moment later, David pulled out his phone. Megan got back into her car. She drove away. David came inside and locked the door behind him. She said she was checking that we were safe. I stared at him at 2 in. The morning she knew I was going to call the police. That was enough. The next morning, we contacted the detective helping us with the case and showed him everything: the hospital records, the messages, the security footage, the medical record request, the daycare visit, the grocery store incident, the vehicle footage, Megan appearing outside our home. He reviewed everything carefully. This is becoming a pattern. He said that was exactly what we needed. We filed for a temporary restraining order. The judge granted it. Megan was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of us, our home, or Jackson's medical providers. For the first time in weeks, the house became quiet. No unknown emails, no new voicemails, no car across the street. No one appeared at the door. We started believing the order had finally worked. Then I opened Instagram. A strange account had posted a photograph of Jackson. I stared at the screen. It was one of the pictures I had once posted publicly. The account belonged to someone calling herself a devoted aunt. There were dozens of photographs of my son. Some came from my old social media posts. Others were pictures I had never seen before. The captions were worse. She talked about Jackson as if she had been part of his life the entire time. My precious nephew can't wait for our next cuddle. My little guy is growing so fast. There had been no cuddles, no visits, no aunt and nephew memories. None of it had happened. Megan had invented an entire relationship with my son online. I searched deeper. There were more accounts, different usernames, different profile pictures, the same stolen photographs. One account included fake stories about babysitting Jackson. Another claimed Megan had been there for his first milestones. David sat beside me as I showed him this isn't normal. I know we reported every account and locked down everything we could, but one question kept bothering me. How had she gotten some of those Pictures I checked the dates, several came from older posts others had. Clearly been taken from places I hadn't shared publicly. Then I noticed one photograph that made me stop it. Showed Jackson sleeping in his stroller. The angle was wrong for a normal family photograph. It had been taken from outside. Someone had been watching us. I immediately saved the image and sent it to the detective. That night, we barely left the house. Then the front door camera sent another alert. I opened the feed. Nothing. Just the porch, the street, the empty sidewalk, then another alert. Appeared and another. Someone was triggering the motion sensor from the side of the house. David pulled up the backyard camera. At first there was nothing, then a shadow moved across the edge of the frame. We called the police. By the time officers arrived, nobody was there, but they found something that made the situation far more serious. A small section of the side gate had been forced open. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing looked disturbed. Whoever had been there hadn't come for valuables. They had come to get close to us. We stood in the nursery doorway after the officers left. Jackson was asleep in his crib. The cameras were running. The doors were locked. The alarms were armed. And yet, somehow, Megan had gotten close enough to our home to make us question whether any of it was enough. We decided to leave for a few days and stay somewhere Megan wouldn't expect. We didn't tell relatives. We didn't tell friends. We didn't post anything online. We packed only what we needed for Jackson and drove away before sunrise. For the first time since the hospital, I thought we might finally be getting ahead of her. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. Nice place. The garden looks peaceful. Stopped breathing for a second. We hadn't told anyone where we were going. The message stayed on my screen for several seconds before I showed it to David. Nice place. The garden looks peaceful. There was no question what it meant. Megan had found us. Again, we had told nobody where we were going, posted nothing online, and changed our routines somehow. She had still managed to locate us. David immediately checked the cameras. Nothing appeared unusual outside the house. But that didn't reassure either of us. He called the detective helping with our case and forwarded the message. The detective told us not to respond and to preserve the original message exactly as it appeared. We followed every instruction from that point forward. We treated every unknown number, unfamiliar vehicle, and unexpected notification as potential evidence. We stopped discussing our movements over ordinary text messages and kept our location private. David's parents helped us change the security settings, and we made sure Jackson's information wasn't visible anywhere publicly. For several days, nothing happened. Then Megan contacted David's parents. She called them repeatedly, telling them I was keeping her away from Jackson out of spite. When they stopped answering, she began contacting other relatives. Each conversation followed the same script. She was recovering. She had made one terrible mistake. I was refusing to forgive her. She just wanted to see her nephew. We didn't engage. The detective told us that the pattern mattered more than any single message. Every unwanted contact was being added to the file. Then Megan's former boyfriend sent us something unexpected. It was a letter. He explained that he had ended his relationship with Megan after seeing how obsessed she had become with Jackson. According to him, she talked about my son constantly. She had collected photographs of him and spent hours discussing ways she could become part of his life again. One line stood out. She believes she is supposed to rescue him. I read the sentence twice. David immediately sent the letter to the detective. Until that point, Megan's behavior had been terrifying, but there had always been room for someone to claim she was simply desperate to repair the relationship. That letter made the situation different. She wasn't trying to repair anything. She'd created a fantasy in which Jackson belonged in her life, and she was becoming increasingly determined to force reality to match it. The detective reviewed the letter and our entire evidence file. We have enough to move forward. He said we submitted the additional evidence to the court and prepared for the permanent restraining order hearing by. Then our file was enormous. There were hospital records documenting Jackson's alcohol poisoning. There were photographs from the night of the incident, screenshots of Megan's messages, security footage from our home records showing her attempt to obtain Jackson's medical information, statements from people who had seen her following us, photographs of the fake social media accounts, and the letter describing her fixation. Then we got the evidence we had been waiting for. One night, the security system alerted us to movement around the property. David opened the camera feed. A woman was climbing the fence for a second. Neither of us spoke. Then the camera angle shifted. It was Megan. She was trying to get into the backyard. The alarm activated before she could get over the fence completely. Megan immediately dropped back down and ran toward the street, but she had made one mistake. The camera had captured her face clearly. David saved the footage in multiple places and called the police. This wasn't a blurry photograph or a suspicious car. This was Megan attempting to enter a secured property while a temporary restraining order was already in effect. The next morning, we went to court. Megan arrived with an attorney. She looked completely different from the woman we had seen outside our house. Her clothes were neat, her hair was carefully styled, and she kept her eyes lowered as though she were ashamed of everything that had happened. Her attorney presented her as an alcoholic who had made a catastrophic mistake and was now trying to recover. He argued that she had never intended to hurt Jackson. He said she loved her nephew. He described her harassment as misguided attempts to reconnect with her family. Then he claimed I had allowed old resentment toward Megan to influence my decisions, I listened without interrupting when it was my turn. To speak, I didn't talk about how much I hated what Megan had done. I talked about what she had actually done. I explained what happened to Jackson. I explained how she disappeared afterward. I described the messages, the fake accounts, the medical record requests, the surveillance, and the attempts to reach us through other people. Then we submitted the security footage. The courtroom became silent as the video played. There was Megan climbing the fence, trying to enter the property, running when the alarm activated. The judge watched the footage twice. Her attorney tried to argue that Megan had not actually entered the property, but the judge interrupted him. The temporary order prohibited her from approaching us. The footage showed exactly that the judge granted the permanent restraining order. Megan was ordered to remain at least 1,000 feet away from me, David, Jackson, our home, and any location directly associated with us. The order would remain in effect for 3 years. For the first time in months, we had a legal boundary that Megan could not simply ignore without consequences. We left the courthouse together. David squeezed my H, and we did it. I wanted to believe the nightmare was finally over. It wasn't. That afternoon, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it. There was no apology, no request for forgiveness, just one sentence. No piece of paper will keep me from what is mine. I immediately forwarded it to the detective. Within minutes, the police were looking for Megan at her last known address. She wasn't there. Her apartment had been abandoned. What officers found inside changed the case completely. There were empty liquor bottles everywhere. Photographs covered one wall, photographs of Jackson. Some were old pictures taken from my social media accounts. Others were photographs we had never posted. The detective told us some appeared to have been taken from a distance. Then they found maps. Our routines had been marked. Jackson's usual schedule, the times David typically left for, workplaces we visited, notes about where we lived and where we went. Megan hadn't just been watching us, she had been studying us. The detective called us afterward and told us an arrest warrant was being pursued. We decided not to return to our home. The secure property where we were staying had cameras, controlled access, and people we trusted. For now, that was enough. 3 days passed, then 4, nothing happened. We began to wonder whether Megan had finally realized she couldn't keep doing this. That hope lasted until the afternoon, when the nanny took Jackson outside. She was walking with him inside the secured community, while another family member stayed nearby. Then she called me. I think she's here. I stood up so quickly that the chair nearly tipped backward. Who, Megan? The nanny's voice dropped. She's near the park. She's keeping her distance. But I know it's her. I called David. He was only minutes away. Stay with Jackson. He told me, don't approach her. I called the police and explained that Megan was violating an active restraining order. The nanny moved toward the secured entrance while keeping Jackson close. A few minutes later, David arrived. He found Megan near the edge of the park. The second she saw him, she turned and ran, but she had nowhere to go. Security officers intercepted her before she could reach the exit. Police arrived moments later. Megan was arrested for violating the restraining order. I stayed inside with Jackson while David handled the situation. Outside, when he finally returned, he looked exhausted. She's in custody. I didn't ask what she had. Said I didn't want another explanation. I only wanted to see my son. Jackson was asleep in his crib, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding him that night. I sat beside him longer than usual. The legal battle wasn't completely finished. Megan would still have hearings, and there were decisions ahead about where we would live and how much contact we would have with relatives who had defended her. But the immediate threat had changed. She'd crossed every line we had put in front of her. She had endangered Jackson. She had lied. She had followed us. She had tried to access his information. She had created fake identities around him. She had entered our property. She had studied our routines. And after a judge ordered her to stay away, she had still come looking for him. There was no longer any argument about whether we had overreacted. The evidence spoke for itself. The next morning, David attended the bail hearing. Megan was granted bail under strict conditions. She had to wear an ankle monitor, submit to regular alcohol testing, and remain 1,000 feet away from us at all times. David told me she had argued with her attorney about the alcohol monitoring. Even after everything, she still didn't want anyone controlling her drinking. We decided to stay where we were until we knew exactly what would happen next. Weeks later, the court ordered Megan to undergo a comprehensive evaluation and treatment for her addiction and other serious behavioral problems identified during the assessment. For the first time, the responsibility for Megan's recovery was no longer sitting on my shoulders. It belonged to her. Months passed. Megan remained under supervision, and according to the reports we received through the proper legal channels, began complying with treatment. She stopped contacting us directly. She stopped appearing near our home. The fake accounts disappeared. Eventually, we returned to our house. We installed a much stronger security system, changed every access code again, and removed old public photographs of Jackson. Our life slowly became quieter, but quiet. Didn't mean forgetting. I still kept the evidence file. I still checked the cameras, and I still refused to give anyone access to Jackson simply because they shared Our last name, Megan, had spent months trying to convince everyone that she deserved another chance now. She had to prove she could live without one, and for the first time, that decision wasn't hers to make. For the first few weeks after Megan's arrest, our lives revolved around routines that would have seemed ridiculous before all of this happened. We checked the security system every morning, kept Jackson's schedule private, and avoided posting anything that could reveal where we were or what we were doing. We weren't living in panic anymore, but we weren't careless either. There was a difference between being afraid and being prepared, and I was determined to learn that difference. Megan remained under strict court supervision. The ankle monitor stayed in place. Alcohol testing was mandatory, and the restraining order remained active. She was also required to participate in treatment for her alcohol addiction and the behavioral issues identified during her evaluation. For once, nobody was asking me to fix her. That mattered more than I expected. Before the arrest, every conversation about Megan eventually became my responsibility. Someone wanted me to forgive her. Someone wanted me to call her. Someone wanted me to understand and what she was going through now. There were professionals, courts, and conditions involved. I didn't have to decide whether Megan deserved another chance. I only had to decide what was safe for my family. The answer was simple. No direct contact. Months passed. There were no messages from unknown numbers. No new social media accounts appeared. No one reported seeing Megan near our home. The silence was strange at first, but eventually it became normal. Jackson grew. He started crawling, then pulling himself up, then taking his first unsteady steps. Those ordinary moments became more important to me than anything happening. With Megan, I wanted to remember my son's childhood for his laugh and his first words, "not." For security alerts and court dates, David, and I continued therapy. Because the damage hadn't disappeared just because Megan was gone. I still checked the locks more than once. I still noticed unfamiliar cars. I still felt tense when someone I didn't recognize walked too close to us in public. But those reactions slowly became less intense. One evening, almost 6 months after Megan's arrest, we received an update. Through the proper legal channels, she had been following her treatment plan, maintaining sobriety, and complying with the restrictions placed on her. There was no request attached, no dem, and no emotional message. Just information. That distinction mattered. Several more months passed with the same pattern. Megan stayed sober. She stayed away. She didn't attempt to contact us. Then a letter arrived through the appropriate channel. I knew immediately who it was from. I almost threw it away without opening it. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table while David stood beside me. "You don't have to read it," he said. No, I opened the envelope. The letter wasn't dramatic. There were no accusations, no guilt trips, no claims that I had ruined her life. Megan wrote that she was sorry for what she had done to Jackson. She acknowledged that giving him alcohol had endangered him, and that everything afterward had been her responsibility. She admitted that the stalking, fake accounts, attempts to obtain information, and breaking into our property had not been acts of love. They had been dangerous behavior. She didn't ask to see Jackson. She didn't ask me to drop the restraining order. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She simply said she understood that she had lost the right to DM and anything from us. I read the letter twice, then I handed it to David. "What do?" You think he finished reading it and looked at me. "I think it's the first time she hasn't asked you for something that was exactly what made the letter different." Still, I wasn't ready to trust her. One good letter couldn't erase months of terrifying behavior. We sent a short acknowledgement through the proper channel and made it clear that direct contact was still off the table. Megan accepted that. Months later, another update came. Then another. Each one showed the same thing. She was staying sober. She was attending treatment. She was respecting the restrictions. She wasn't trying to get around them. For more than a year, she did exactly what she had refused to do before she left us alone. Eventually, her therapist proposed a controlled video session. David and I discussed it for days. There was no reason to rush. We could refuse. Nobody could force us. But I also realized something important. Protecting Jackson didn't require me to remain trapped in the worst moment of my life forever. If we did this, it would happen under controlled conditions. No surprise visits, no private conversations, no access to Jackson, no promises about the future. We agreed to one video session. When Megan appeared on the screen, I barely recognized her. She looked healthier, her face was clearer, her eyes more focused, and there was none of the frantic energy I remembered from the last time I'd seen her. She didn't start by asking about Jackson. She started with an apology. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I stayed silent. "Don't expect you to trust me either." She explained that treatment had forced her to confront how badly alcohol had affected her judgment. More importantly, she had been forced to confront something she had avoided for years. She hadn't just wanted to be an aunt. She had become obsessed with the idea that being Jackson's aunt would give her life meaning. When we denied her access, that obsession had become more extreme. "I convinced myself I was fighting for my family," she said. "But I was actually destroying yours for once. I didn't hear an excuse hidden inside the words she wasn't blaming. Alcohol. She wasn't blaming me. She wasn't blaming our family. She was taking responsibility. Still I made my boundary clear. You are not getting access to Jackson. Megan nodded. I understood. And no babysitting. No being alone with him. No showing up unexpectedly. Nothing I understood. And if you ever violate those boundaries, we're done. She didn't argue that was the first thing she did that made me believe change might actually be possible. We had several more video sessions over the following months. They remained controlled and brief. Megan never asked for Jackson. She never complained about the restrictions. She never tried to manipulate David or me through relatives. Eventually we agreed to one supervised meeting between the adults. It took place in a professional setting with the appropriate support in place. Megan arrived, carrying a small gift. She stopped before handing it to me. I brought this for Jackson. I looked at the bag. We didn't agree to gifts. She immediately nodded. You're right. She placed the bag on the floor beside her and didn't mention it again. That tiny moment told me more than any apology could have. The old Megan would have argued. She would have said I was being cruel. She would have insisted that one gift couldn't hurt this. Megan accepted the boundary over time. The relationship between us changed, not back to what it had been, not into some perfect sister relationship. It became something much more cautious. Megan continued treatment and remained sober. She eventually found work, helping people dealing with addiction, using her own experience to try to keep others from making the same mistakes. I didn't suddenly trust her. Trust doesn't work that way. It came back in inches. She asked before sending anything to Jackson. She never appeared without permission. She never demanded access. She never questioned our parenting. She never tried to recruit relatives to pressure us. When family members tried to rush things, I shut it down. I wasn't interested in pretending the past hadn't happened just because everyone was tired of talking about it. The people who had defended Megan eventually understood that reconciliation couldn't happen on their schedule. It had to happen on ours. By the time Jackson was 4, Megan had been sober for years. We held a small birthday gathering at a local park. Megan was allowed to attend under the conditions we had established. She remained around other adults and never attempted to separate herself with Jackson. She brought him a picture book before giving it to him. She showed it to me. Is this okay? I checked the book and nodded yes. Jackson took it from her and immediately started flipping through the pages. Megan smiled. She didn't try to turn the moment into something bigger. She didn't say she'd been waiting years for this. She didn't demand a hug. She simply let him enjoy the book. Later I found her sitting away from the group. You okay? She nodded. I'm okay. It's just strange being around alcohol and not drinking. There were adults at the party having beer and wine, so I understood what she meant. Do you need to leave? No, I have strategies now. She paused. Today is 3 years sober. I congratulated her. She smiled, but didn't celebrate herself. Then she said something I didn't expect. Your boundaries helped save me. I didn't answer immediately. If you had let me back in because everyone pressured you, I might never have faced what I was doing. I thought you were punishing me. Now I understood. And you were protecting Jackson. That was the first time I believed she understood the difference, not because she said the right words, because her behavior had finally matched them. Years later, our relationship remained limited, but stable. Megan never had unsupervised access to Jackson. She never asked for it. She always checked before giving him anything. She respected our rules even when she didn't personally agree with them. Jackson knew her simply as Aunt Megan. He knew she had been sick when he was a baby and had made serious mistakes. We never burdened him with the details. He was too young to understand, and he wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't especially attached to her either, and honestly, I was fine with that. I didn't need him to have a perfect relationship with someone simply because she was family. What mattered was that he was safe. I still had moments when my old fear returned. If Megan moved too quickly near Jackson, I noticed. If she disappeared from my view during a family gathering, I checked where she was. If someone mentioned alcohol, I became more alert. Those reactions didn't vanish overnight, but they stopped controlling my life. I realized I didn't have to choose between forgiving Megan and protecting my son. I could acknowledge her recovery without giving her unlimited access. I could appreciate genuine change without pretending the past had never happened. I could love someone from a distance, and I could change my mind if her behavior ever changed again. That last part mattered most. My boundaries weren't punishment. They were conditions for trust. Eventually, David and I started talking about having another child. The conversation brought back memories I hadn't expected. For a moment, I wondered whether the fear would always be there. David took my H, and we know what to do. Now, he was right. We had security. We had boundaries. We had learned to trust evidence instead of promises. Most importantly, we had learned that protecting our children didn't require permission from anyone else. I still keep Megan's letter from treatment, not because I need a reminder to forgive her. I keep it because it reminds me how quickly a family can mistake pressure for love and how dangerous that mistake can become. Megan may remain sober for the rest Of her life, I hope she does. She may continue helping other people escape the addiction that once controlled her. I hope that too. But none of that changes what happened to Jackson. Recovery doesn't. Erase consequences, apologies don't automatically restore trust. And being family doesn't create an entitlement to someone's child. Our relationship survived, but it survived differently. There is no perfect ending where everything goes back to the way it was. There shouldn't be the old version of our family depended on everyone pretending certain problems weren't. Serious, I stopped doing that the night my son ended up in the hospital. Now, when something feels wrong, I listen. When someone crosses a boundary, I act. And when someone proves they have changed, I can acknowledge it without handing them the keys to my life. Megan earned a place in our lives again slowly through years of consistent behavior. She did not earn unlimited access to Jackson. She may never earn that. And I have finally made peace. With that, my son will grow up knowing that family can be complicated, that people can make terrible choices, and that people can sometimes change, but he will also grow up knowing something more important. Love does not mean ignoring danger. Forgiveness does not mean surrendering boundaries, and protecting your child is never something you need to apologize for. That is the lesson I carry with me now. I didn't save my sister, she had to save herself. I protected my son, and in the end, that was exactly what I was supposed to do.